Before you think of reality as a place, try thinking of it as a process that is constantly being updated. Every sight you see, every sound you hear, every thought you form arrives to you through signals that take time to travel. Nothing appears instantly. Everything must cross a gap, even inside your own body. That simple fact is the doorway into the hidden rule that shapes the universe. Imagine clapping your hands. You see them meet at the same moment, you hear the sound, but the light reaches your eyes faster than the vibration reaches your ears. Your brain quietly edits these differences so the world feels smooth and continuous. But behind the scenes, reality is being delivered to you in fragments, stitched together by the speed at which information can move. This rule does not care if the signal is a flash of light, a radio wave, or a nerve impulse in your spine. It sets a maximum rate at which any cause can become an effect. No message, no force, no influence can skip ahead of that limit. The universe is not allowed to update itself faster than this. Feynman loved to point out that what we call understanding often comes from noticing what does not change. You can move, rotate, accelerate, or fall through space, but there is one thing that refuses to adjust itself to you. The speed at which light carries information stays the same, and that stubborn behavior forces everything else to adapt. Space bends, time stretches, motion becomes heavier. Not because the universe is trying to be strange, but because it is trying to stay consistent with its own rule. Think of reality as a giant network. Every point in space is a node. Every moment in time a step in a sequence. The hidden rule decides how fast a message can hop from one node to the next. If it could jump instantly, the entire network would collapse into a single, meaningless moment. There would be no before and after, no memory, no anticipation, no story. Instead, the universe enforces a delay. That delay is what gives you the feeling of moving forward through life, of leaving something behind and approaching something new. And as that feeling deepens, motion itself begins to change character, turning speed into resistance, movement into effort, and simple travel through space into a quiet negotiation with the very structure of time. As motion turns into effort, you begin to notice something strange. Pushing an object a little faster feels easy at first, but each step beyond that demands more than the last. It is as if the universe itself is leaning back, not with friction, but with a kind of quiet resistance built into the fabric of space and time. In everyday life, mass feels like weight, like something you can hold or lift. But at a deeper level, mass is how strongly something resists being changed. It is a measure of how much reality must be rearranged when an object's motion is altered. The faster you try to move, the more of the universe you have to persuade to come along with you. This is where time quietly enters the story. You never notice it in normal moments, but as speed increases, clocks begin to fall out of step. A moving clock ticks more slowly than one left behind. The world along the direction of motion subtly compresses. These effects are not illusions or tricks of perception. They are physical changes, recorded by instruments and confirmed by experiments that repeat the same result again and again. High above Earth, satellites carry clocks that must be constantly corrected. Without those tiny adjustments, navigation systems would drift by kilometers in a single day. Particles and accelerators survive longer when they move faster, their internal rhythms stretched out as if time itself were being pulled thin. All of this comes from the same hidden rule. Information cannot outrun the limits set by light, so motion cannot be spent entirely on space. Some of it must always be spent on time. As you approach that ultimate pace, the balance becomes more extreme. Each added bit of speed costs more energy than the last, as if reality is charging a rising price to protect its own consistency. This is why nothing with mass ever reaches the speed of light. There is no wall to crash into, no line drawn across the universe. Instead, There is a smooth but relentless climb, an ever-steepening slope where effort rises without bound. The closer you get, the more your movement through time slows, until there is almost no time left to give up. Light lives on the other side of this balance. It carries no mass, no internal clock that needs to tick. It spends all of its motion crossing space and none moving through time. From its own strange point of view, if such a point of view can be imagined at all, the entire journey collapses into a single, timeless moment. And once you see motion and time bound together this way, the path of everything around you begins to look less like a straight line and more like a curve, shaped by the presence of matter itself, guiding planets, particles, and even light along routes that reveal the quiet geometry of the universe. As paths begin to curve, gravity stops feeling like a mysterious pull and starts to look like a shape you are moving through. Picture walking across a perfectly flat floor. Your steps fall in a straight, predictable line. Now imagine that same floor gently warped into a shallow bowl. You still try to walk straight, but your path bends, guided by the surface beneath you, rather than by any invisible hand reaching out to grab you. This is what massive objects do to the universe. They do not send out a force across empty space. They reshape the space and time around them, creating a landscape that everything else naturally follows. Planets trace arcs around stars. Moons loop around planets. Even light, which seems weightless and untouchable, curves when it passes near something heavy enough. The night sky becomes a map of this hidden geometry. Light from distant galaxies can be bent into glowing arcs or split into multiple images by the presence of massive clusters along its path. You are not only seeing what exists far away, you are seeing the shape of the space between you and it, revealed by the way light has been guided on its long journey to your eyes. Time bends along with space. A clock closer to a massive object ticks more slowly than one farther away. On the surface of Earth, the difference is small, but it is real and measurable. High above the planet, satellites experience time at a slightly faster rate, and their systems must constantly adjust to stay synchronized with the world below. Here, the hidden rule about how fast reality can update itself quietly defines what can influence what. Every event is wrapped inside a region of space-time that marks where its effects can travel. Outside that region, the event might as well not exist yet. The universe draws invisible boundaries around every moment, shaping a vast network of cause and consequence that never overlaps out of order. Seen this way, motion, time, and gravity collapse into a single idea. They are not separate features of reality, but different expressions of the same underlying structure. The limit that slows clocks and resists speed also sculpts the routes that everything must follow through the cosmos. Once you begin to think in terms of this hidden shape, the universe feels less like a collection of objects and more like a continuous surface you are always moving across. Every step you take, every signal you send, every star you observe is part of that same unfolding geometry, quietly guiding what can happen next. And as solid as this picture feels, it rests on a foundation that becomes far less smooth when you look closer, where paths multiply, certainty fades, and the universe begins to explore not just one route forward, but every route it is allowed to consider. When you move closer to that foundation, the smooth surface of reality begins to ripple. Paths no longer feel like clean lines drawn across a curved landscape. They start to blur into clouds of possibility, where motion is not a single choice but a chorus of options, quietly competing to become the one you finally observe. Feynman described this strange behavior with an idea that feels almost like poetry. A particle traveling from one point to another does not pick a path. It samples all of them. Straight routes, winding detours, and even wildly looping trails that seem to defy common sense all play a role. Each possible path contributes a small influence, like overlapping waves, and the universe adds them together to decide what actually appears. Most of these influences cancel out. The wild, complicated paths fade away, leaving behind the calm, predictable motion you experience in everyday life. But beneath that calm is a constant, restless negotiation between what could happen and what is allowed to happen. Even what you call empty space is not truly empty here. It hums with temporary flickers of energy, brief appearances of particles that borrow existence for an instant and then vanish again. These ghostly events leave subtle fingerprints behind, tiny shifts in energy and force that can be measured, proving that the vacuum itself is alive with motion and exchange. Through all of this apparent chaos, the hidden rule still holds its quiet authority. No matter how many paths are explored, no matter how tangled the web of possibilities becomes, information does not jump ahead of the limits set by light. The universe may consider countless futures, but it reveals them to you one moment at a time, in a steady, ordered flow. This balance is what allows a shared reality to exist at all. The quantum world is free to be uncertain, layered, and full of overlapping outcomes, while the world you live in remains stable, consistent, and common to everyone around you. The same rule that guides galaxies and gravity also guards the boundary between possibility and fact. Here, reality feels less like a solid structure and more like a process in motion, constantly resolving a storm of potential into a single experience present. Each observation, each interaction is like a small decision made by the universe, choosing one story to tell out of many it could have told. And as that story grows, moment by moment, it does not stay confined to the smallest scales. The same quiet limit that shapes these fleeting paths stretches outward, carrying its influence across distances so vast that the light revealing them becomes a message from a time long before you were ever here to receive it. That message from the past fills the night sky. Every point of light you see is not showing you what exists right now, but what once existed when its signal began the long journey toward your eyes. The universe reveals itself in layers of history, stacked across distance, turning space into a kind of memory that stretches back billions of years. Nearby stars speak of a recent chapter, while distant galaxies whisper about an era when everything was younger, hotter, and still taking shape. Look far enough, and you reach a faint, ancient glow that comes from a time before stars and planets even formed, a soft echo of the universe's earliest moments, still drifting through space. This is what the hidden rule does on the largest scale. It turns vision into archaeology. You are not just seeing across space, you are seeing across time, piecing together a story that was written long before you arrived to read it. But there is also a limit to how much of that story can ever reach you. The universe is not only expanding, it is stretching the very space that light must cross. Some regions are being carried away so quickly that their signals can never catch up. They still exist, still evolve, still follow the same rules, but they remain forever beyond your horizon, silent and unreachable. This horizon is not a wall you could travel to. It is a moving boundary that defines what can ever become part of your experience. As time passes, more of the universe slips beyond it, not by disappearing, but by falling behind the maximum speed at which information can travel. Within this boundary, however, there is extraordinary clarity. By studying the light that does arrive, you can reconstruct the life story of the cosmos. You can trace the birth of the first atoms, the ignition of the earliest stars, the slow assembly of galaxies, and the long chain of events that eventually led to worlds capable of wondering how they came to be. Every telescope becomes a bridge across time, collecting ancient signals and turning them into knowledge. The same quiet rule that limits motion and shapes gravity also decides which chapters of the universe's history can be read, and which will remain forever closed. And as you absorb these distant stories, the perspective begins to turn inward again, because the boundary that shapes the edge of the observable universe also exists within you, guiding how memory forms, how anticipation grows, and how the present moment keeps unfolding, one step at a time, into the only future you will ever be able to touch. That unfolding present is not just something you move through. It is something you help create. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every action you take becomes part of the chain of signals moving forward through time, carried by the same rule that guides light across the universe. Inside your body, tiny electrical impulses race through networks of cells, turning sensation into thought and thought into movement. These impulses are not special. They obey the same limit as starlight and radio waves. Your awareness itself is built on information traveling, arriving, and being stitched together into a continuous sense of now. This is why the past feels solid. Once a signal has moved on, once an event has sent its influence forward, it becomes part of the record. It cannot be reached again, because nothing is allowed to travel backward across the chain of cause and effect. Memory is not a doorway to what was. It is a copy, carried into the present by physical traces left behind in your brain and in the world. The future, by contrast, feels open because it has not yet been written into that chain. It exists only as possibility, waiting for signals, decisions, and interactions to turn it into something that can be remembered. Seen this way, meaning is not something added on top of physics. It grows naturally from the structure of reality itself. Because influence has a limit, what you do matters within a reach, within a horizon where your actions can touch other lives, shape other moments, and become part of a shared story. The speed of light stops being just a number in a textbook. It becomes the edge of connection, the boundary of impact, the quiet rule that decides how far a moment can travel and how deeply it can echo. Beyond that boundary, there may be galaxies, events, even entire histories unfolding in silence. They exist, but they cannot speak to you, and you cannot speak to them. Not because of distance alone, but because the universe has drawn a line that even reality itself will not cross. Yet within that line, there is an extraordinary space to explore. You can listen to whispers from the early universe. You can send messages across oceans and into orbit. You can turn curiosity into a bridge between what is known and what is still waiting to be discovered. Feynman once said that the pleasure of finding things out is one of the greatest joys there is. Here, that joy becomes part of the same story as stars, particles, and time itself. Because in the end, the hidden rule does not trap you inside reality. It gives you a place within it, a position in the flow, a moment that belongs to you, and a path forward, lit by signals from the past, shaped by choices in the present, and always opening into a future that is still being written.